We'll just wait a few minutes and wait for members to show up due to the inclement weather, so it'll just be a few minutes. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and get started because we do have a lot of items to get through today, tomorrow, and Friday in order for us to start working on the budget next week. So the first item on the agenda, are there any bill introductions this morning? Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is designating November the 14th of each year as Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day in the state of Kansas, and the number is RS 1105.
All right, committee, you've heard the bill introduction. Is there a second? Second by Representative Hoy. All those in favor of the bill introduction say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You can have the sidebar conversation on that. Any other further bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none. Committee, we do have the annual reports, actually, since we're going to be doing some university budgets today, but we have the annual reports from the universities. I believe they've been passed out to Jeffrey, or they will be administered to him. And so if you want copies of those, please get with my chief of staff in regards to those annual reports. I will now turn it over to the Higher Education Budget Committee, and I will have Chairman Howe start with Emporia State University. Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Emporia State University for fiscal year 25, that'll be the second page of the Budget Committee report. I will begin there. Mr. Chair, because there's no changes with the budget committees from what the LBC recommended, may I skip the agency summary? Or would you like me to read that?
You can handle it any way you'd like.
Okay. Well, the Special Committee on Legislative Budget concurred with the agency's revised estimate for 25, and the Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation for fiscal year 25. Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions on fiscal year 25.
Committee, are there any questions for Chairman Howe? Seeing none, Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will read this agency summary. So the agency requested $116.9 million, including $45.3 million SGF. The agency request is 18.5, or 13.7% below the fiscal year 25 approved amount. The decrease is primarily attributable to SGF expenditures, including $8.1 million for student union debt, $9 million SGF for the ESU investment model, partially offset by increases of $1.2 million for student financial aid and $2 million for legislative DEI adjustments. Other decreases include $5.6 million for capital projects and just short of $1 million for student union fees. This is partially offset by increases, including $1.4 million for deferred maintenance projects and $658,000 for all other adjustments. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate for fiscal year 26. The Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation for 26 with the following adjustments: to add $2.2 million SGF for costs associated with legal expenses and for salaries and benefits due to program reductions, and add language that the funding is used solely for the purposes related to incurred costs for legal expenses and salaries and benefits due to program reductions for fiscal year 26. And to explain a little bit more about that, Emporia State University several years ago made some changes, had to let go certain faculty, eliminate underperforming programs, and things of that nature. During that time, they've been party to a lawsuit. Some of the 11, I think it's 11 former employees or faculty filed a lawsuit in federal court. And so basically, Emporia State followed through on what the Board of Regents allowed them to do and to make the necessary changes to stop the bleeding at the university in terms of I guess the money that was being invested in them. And so they were trying to make the right decisions. They were following Board of Regents policy and how to do that. And they were then subject to this lawsuit. So since that time, they've been paying these 11 employees, as I understand it, their salary. And so this has been going on for several years. And right before the end of the year, a federal judge ruled, in essence, that tenure is a property right. And so they're still on the hook for additional salaries and wages and things of that nature. This is added to their expense for legal to be represented in court. And so we heard about this, and the committee decided to add the $2.2 million to support them, because really they're following through on the KBOR charge to right-size Emporia State University. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions on fiscal year 26.
All right, thank you, Chairman Howe. So in regards to that $2.2 million, how many years in the future will we be looking at this? It's not just going to be in fiscal year 2026. From what your comments, it's just going to be an ongoing for quite some time.
Well, when we discussed this in committee, the motion that was made was to state explicitly that it's one time. Now, I know the revisers are working on language for that proviso, so I don't have that for you today. It's not finalized, but that was the intent. It was for only fiscal year 26.
All right. And then when we have the other budgets for Fort Hays State University and also Pittsburgh State University, last year there was the addition of $3 million for a regional stabilization, and that is included in the state general fund allocation for Emporia, and then we'll also see that in Fort Hays State and Pittsburgh.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's in the budget bill. Yeah.
Right. And just to, I guess, educate new members on the committee and then refresh the memories of those that served on this last year. What is that regional stabilization necessarily for?
Well, I believe the intent of that is to, I believe in the early 2000s, they changed the way they provided the base aid for the regent universities. And they switched to like a block grant type of a format. And during that time, there's been inequity that's been baked into that base budget. Favors the 3 research institutions more so than it does the 3 regional universities. And so the 3 regional universities, I believe, approached KBOR about the need for more of that institutional support. And so they got approved for their agency request for a regional stabilization fund. Now there is some latitude that I believe the universities have in how they can use that. For instance, one university started a scholarship program, and that affects 700 students currently. So each institution can use it a little differently to support them in their needs, whatever they may be faced with. So for Emporia State, a couple years ago, there was a $9 million enhancement to support their ESU model for reinvestment, and they focused on students, and they were, I believe, the only regent university that did not raise tuition, and they eliminated all student fees. And so when you talk about value, the return on investment, it goes directly to the students at Emporia State.
All right, thank you, Chairman Howe. Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it sounds like there is an unhealthy amount of arrogance in the topic of tenure, and it's very discouraging to me. So I'm wondering if your committee is looking at digging deeper into this after we get our budgets out so that we can, ascertain if there's a state recommendation or a statutory solution to this, because it just seems unconscionable that someone would be so protective and they would have tenure and they would never be able to have their position touched.
Chairman Howe.
Yes, it's certainly a far-reaching ruling. I believe the Attorney General for the state of Kansas filed a motion to reconsider in federal court, but it's hard to say how long it's going to take for them to consider that request. And it certainly poses a huge unfunded liability to the rest of higher ed, the higher education system in Kansas. I did introduce request bill sponsorship on a legislation on behalf of a private Kansan or an individual Kansan to address this. I just did that 2 days ago in Judiciary. So that'll be read in, given a bill number, and hopefully we'll get a hearing on that so we can perhaps address it from a statute standpoint.
Any further questions in regards to fiscal year 2026 for Emporia State University? Seeing none, Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Committee on Appropriations adopt the Budget Committee report for Emporia State University for fiscal years 25 and 26.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Amix. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll go to Kansas State University next. And so Kansas State University is broken up into 3 different budget areas, and we're going to start with just Kansas State University. So you should have a yellow sheet as well that talks about the differences between the governor's and the LBC recommendation. Starting on page 2 for fiscal year 25. The agency revised estimate is $810.3 million, including $204 million SGF. The revised estimate is $111 million, or almost 16% above the FY25 approved amount. The increase is primarily attributable to SGF expenditures, including $6.4 million SGF for legislative DEI adjustments, $6 million SGF for state capital renewal, 3.9 SGF million for student financial aid, 2.3 SGF for operating adjustments, 800,000 SGF for KBOR for demolition funds, 450,000 SGF for needs-based aid, 250,000 SGF for the KSU Animal Diagnostic Lab feasibility study. Other increases include 41.3 million for the Ag Innovation Initiative, 18.5 million for educational building fund projects, 12.1 million for the College of Agriculture Infrastructure, 8.5 million for federal research awards, 7.1 million for deferred maintenance projects, and 3.3 million for all other adjustments. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate in 25 with the following adjustments: delete 65.5 FTE positions for contractual services and capital improvements for 25. The Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation for fiscal year 25. Mr. Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
So in the governor's recommendation, she had 2 items for fiscal year 2025. One was in regards to debt service for Strong Complex, adding $461,000 from special revenue funds, and the other was the Pure Imagination facility, deleting $3.1 million. Were those discussed in committee?
Mr. Chairman, no, they were not discussed. No.
All right, thank you. Committee, any discussion in regards to fiscal year 2025? All right, seeing none, Chairman Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For fiscal year 26, the agency requests $738 million, including $152 million SGF. The agency request is $65 million, or 9.7% above the 25 approved amount. The increase is attributable to increases in SGF expenditures, including $6.4 million for DEI adjustments, $3.9 million SGF for student financial aid, partially offset by SGF decreases, including $25 million SGF for the KSU Ag Innovation, $4 million for the Central Immersive Training Hub. Other increases include $53.1 million for the KSU Ag Innovation Initiative, $11.7 million for deferred maintenance, $7.6 million for federal research awards, $6 million for campus capital improvement projects, $1.8 million for all other adjustments, and it's partially offset by a decrease of $12.5 million for the College of Ag Infrastructure. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate for fiscal year 26 with the following adjustments: to delete the 65.5 FTE positions for fiscal year 26. The Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation for fiscal year 26. I'll stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so again, I'm going to reference the governor's recommendations on the yellow sheet that we have in front of us for 26. There's the deletion of $3.1 million SGF for the Pure Imagination facility, then adding debt service payments from special revenue funds for Seton Hall and Strong Complex. And I'm assuming that by having those not included by the committee's recommendation, we're continuing the $3.1 million.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
And then how are we addressing the debt service payments that the governor had added but not included in the Budget Committee's recommendations?
You know, to be quite honest, it wasn't a conversation that Kansas State engaged the committee with that I'm aware of. And so it could be an oversight perhaps on my part as chair, but I wasn't made aware that it was an issue by the university.
Well, I would say just for due diligence for next week when we have the discussion on the budget, perhaps maybe have a recommendation when we work the budget in regards to those 3 items that the governor has included in her budget. Vice Chair Williams.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was actually going to follow up on that as well. We're sitting up here not knowing what the Pure Imagination facility even is. And so if the governor struck it for 2 years, perhaps the analyst can give us a little bit of insight of what it is and maybe any rationale provided.
Chairman Howe.
This is a initiative that's close to my district in Salina. It's a project that's involved Kansas State University, the Department of Commerce, the governor's office as well. So I don't know the dynamic of why she didn't include the bond payment, because I believe that's what it's in the budget bill for, is the bonding. They broke ground on this new facility for spatial computing and this fall, and so it's already underway, and I believe the project was bonded. And what's in the budget bill is for bonding, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I guess to elaborate on that, was that bonding authority from us in the last year's budget bill, or is that just bonding that K-State did on their own? It's in this year's bill. For $45 million. Okay, so we authorized the bonding, but no appropriation of funding for bond service. All right.
Okay, that makes sense. So as I understand it, what the governor was wanting to do is to move the debt service to the Department of Administration. But I wasn't made aware of that.
Vice Chair Williams, did you have any more questions?
If we want to just leave it, or do you want to?
Well, I think, again, as I mentioned in regards to fiscal year 25, but especially since I think we need to have further discussion when we're talking about the budget as to why the governor deleted this in 25 and 26. And then, as I mentioned before, in regards to the debt service payments from special revenue funds for Seton Hall and Strong Complex, I'll make a motion that we have a review of item number 2 on the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 2025, and then all 3 items in regards to fiscal year 2026 when we are deliberating on the budget next week. So that's my motion. Seconded by Representative Sutton. Discussion, Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I was sitting over here trying to go through the paperwork. I'm not familiar, if this bond has already been issued, debt service really isn't one of those variable sort of, we can pay it if we want to sort of line items. So I'm a little curious as to why it's being added and subtracted anywhere in a budget. It should be baked into capital outlay, I would assume. So a little curious. Love to see what this review has to say.
And that's the need for the motion, is to have more information.
And I appreciate that.
And moving forward, just because the governor didn't include it, but again, if it's something that a debt service that we are obligated to pay, we're gonna have to pay it. So I think we just have more discussion on it. Any further discussion in regards to the motion? All right, seeing none, I close on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. We're back on the budget for Kansas State University for 2026. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Committee on Appropriations adopt the Budget Committee report for K-State University for fiscal year 25 and 26 as amended.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Amix. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next is K-State University Extension Systems and Ag Research. So in this budget is what K-State 105 is funded through. So many of you have received information, probably distributed by the committee staff to you about that. So the agency's revised estimate is $181.2 million, including 61.9 SGF. The revised estimate is 13.5, or 8% above the 25 approved amount. The increase is attributable to 3 million SGF for the DEI adjustments, 2.2 million for research and salaries, 8.3 million for grants and research, and 46,000 for all other adjustments. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate in 25, and the Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation for 25. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, committee, any questions in regards to fiscal year 2025? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I strongly believe I'm going to regret this. But nonetheless, I've seen it a couple of times now. What are the legislative DEI adjustments that we're talking about here? What are we talking about?
Chairman Howe.
So that was a proviso that was in the budget bill last year that basically instructed the universities to go before the State Finance Council. A certain portion of their budgets were held back until they could certify to the State Finance Council that they were no longer requesting or applicants for employment or student financial aid or promotion, asking for any statements on DEI. So they got that certified by the State Finance Council, so the State Finance Council released the money back to the universities.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you for that. That wasn't nearly as painful as I was afraid that was going to be. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you. It might now be a little painful. Okay. I'm looking at DEI adjustments. Is there a list of what was all included in this adjustment?
Chairman Howe.
So, Representative, the amount of funding that was withheld from the universities was upwards of $35 million. And so part of that was attributable to each of the regent institutions. And so what's shown here is just that adjustment back to Kansas State University Extension specifically.
Representative Ballard.
And you said that included positions, scholarships, and
Sure.
a list of anything. So my other question would be, it's under DEI, but how would they identify those positions and funding?
Chairman Howe.
So this HB 2460 that was enacted and even the governor allowed it to become law, it just prohibits universities from requesting statements on diversity, equity, or inclusion, or any other political ideology. And so the universities started scaling scrubbing that requirement off of their employment websites and such, and that took some time. And that's why that proviso was added, to make sure that they were following the intent of the legislature. So everybody complied. I'm not aware of any outstanding complaints right now. So it looked like it worked pretty well. It doesn't eliminate DEI at universities.
Representative Ballard.
It doesn't eliminate DEI, but it eliminates the funding.
No. Chairman Howe.
I'm not aware of any dedicated funding for DEI that we appropriate in the line items of our budgets. But universities could choose if they wanted to focus on whatever it is, you know, diversity or inclusion activities on campus, they can still do that.
Okay.
So the money was restored, Representative.
Okay.
It was an action by the State Finance Council this last summer, I believe.
I appreciate your answers, and I will never go after the messenger. I just needed clarification. Thank you very much.
Any discussion in regards to 2025 or further discussion? Seeing none, Chairman Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to fiscal year 26. The agency requested $181.9 million, including $62 million SGF. Agency request is $14 million, or 8% above the 25 approved amount. The increase is primarily attributable to $3 million SGF for those adjustments we talked about. $2.5 million for research salaries and wages, $8.3 million for grants and research, and $334,000 for all other adjustments. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate for fiscal year 26, and the Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation for 26 with the following adjustment: to delete $5 million SGF from cooperative extension operating account, and to delete language that the ending, well, basically it deletes the monies for K-State 105, deletes the $5 million. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, committee, any questions in regard to fiscal year 2026? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on KSU 105, was there an anticipation that, I think we funded that 2 years, was there an anticipation that we would fund that a certain amount of time, 3 years or 4 years or 2 years? Do you remember?
Chairman Howell.
Yes, I can remember. I believe it was kind of a 2-year pilot, if you will. That's my understanding. And they didn't use that word pilot, but that's kind of what they were wanting when they first approached the legislature about this new initiative. And, you know, I was told in my office at the time that, hey, if we don't think this is working, we'll come back and we'll tell you, because we don't want to, you know, try to fund a program that's not working and benefiting Kansans. So they did not come back with that answer necessarily, but the Budget Committee did decide to delete the funding for K-State 105.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this may be a bit of a discussion, so I'm going to start now, and then I will make a motion in the next budget. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of consternation about 105, and I know some on this committee may have fatigue, but K-State, I think, has reached out to all of you with how it has impacted your district. Some more than others, some a little less. Nonetheless, some had angst because it's purple, some had angst because it said K-State on it. It is simply a matter of what K-State was doing, much like we talked about in a previous discussion about that the university was following what the regents wanted. This was what K-State's answer was the 105 program. It takes a while to get the thing fired up. It's hard to have anything to have an immediate result, and the data that we have. In many discussions as we move forward, I still think there's a refocus and to look at what they are moving forward, because I think part of the issue was when they came and this was started was everybody had their own idea what it was going to be. And so, Mr. Chairman, I will bring that up in a motion, but I wanted to talk about that as far as we set up moving forward, and if there's a way to have that with money that will be in another budget. So that's what I have for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Howe, do you have a response?
I guess the only thing I can really comment on is at the time when we had our budget discussions, it wasn't clear to us the return on it of investment of K-State 105. Now, to give them credit, I did go back and watch their full presentation that they gave to the Commerce Committee, which I thought they did an excellent presentation, to be quite honest. They didn't have that opportunity necessarily in my committee. So our view was a little bit more narrow, a little bit more compressed in terms of our time. But we made our decision. And the discussion in our committee had to do with, if I'm going to spend money on behalf of taxpayers, do I want to spend it towards K-State 105, or do I want to spend it towards the vet med side of things? And I know they're different budgets, so we had some overlapping conversation about that, and I'll just kind of leave it at that for now. As I understand, the representative maybe has a motion when we get to the vet med part of it, so I would wait to comment further until then.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will make a motion to approve that the Committee on Appropriations adopt the Budget Committee report for K-State Research and Extension and for fiscal years 25 and 26. Yep.
Committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Amix. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Kansas State University Vet Med Center. So the agency revised estimate is $84 million, including $18.2 million SGF. The revised estimate is $14.2 million, or 20% above the 25 approved amount. This is attributable to $866,000 SGF for those adjustments, $5.9 million for Mosier Hall animal renovations, $5.1 million and 15 FTE for the vet hospital staff and equipment, $890,000 for all other adjustments. It's partially offset by a decrease of $145,000 for administrative adjustments and about $5,200 for adjusted rates for faculty of distinction. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate in 25 with the following adjustments: to delete the 15 FTE positions for new veterinary assistants and diagnostic techs at the Vet Health Center in 25, and the Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation in 25. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Howe. Any questions in regards to fiscal year 2025? All right. Seeing none, Chairman Howe, may move on to 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agency requests $78.2 million, including $18.3 SGF for fiscal year 26. Agency request is $8.4 million, or 12% above the 25 approved amount. The increase is attributable to those DEI adjustments of $866,000, $5 million, and 15 FTE positions for the vet hospital staff and equipment, $1.6 million for the federal awards, $923,000 for group health insurance and commodities, and $111,000 for all other adjustments. It was partially offset by a decrease of $90,000 for administrative adjustments and $5,000 for to adjust the rates for faculty of distinction. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate for fiscal year 26 with the following adjustments: to delete the 15 FTE positions for the vet assistants and diagnostic techs. And the Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation with the following adjustment: to add 7.5 million SGF for the KSU Vet Med Center operating expenditures for fiscal year 26. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, committee questions in regards to fiscal year 2026. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just a, I think it's a addition error. Figure 7, I believe that the totals from the agency should reflect the same as the totals for the Legislative Budget Committee. It looks like we're spending a lot more than what the agency asked for, and don't believe those add up quite right. So just a error in the addition.
Further discussion? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the process and the budget committees. And then once those things are passed out, it comes to us as appropriators. And if it passes out of here in the budget, it goes to the floor where all of us are appropriators. K-State 105 was not meant to be all things to all people. What it was to utilize the 105 counties where they have extension agents to help be that clearinghouse. It was never meant to do small business loans. It was never meant to go out and recruit businesses. What it was to be a resource. As you looked at 105 counties, and you see some that have embraced it and some that have had challenges. So as this came out of committee and we heard this, we went to K-State and said, is this a program worth fighting for? And a bit of an adjustment. And so, Mr. Chairman, I move that of the $7.5 million SGF that was approved for the Vet Medical Center, that we split that $4 million go back to the K-State budget for 105 for the 2026 year, and the balance of $3.5 stays with the Veterinary Medical Center for fiscal year 2026.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Hoffman. Discussion on the motion. Representative Wassinger, did you have a question on the motion or on the budget itself? Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the motion, can you tell us how much we currently spend for the 105 extension offices?
Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chair, I don't know. I don't see that's relevant.
The reason it would be relevant is because if we are funding the extension offices and we're adding an additional 4 million or 5 million for the extension purposes, because I will admit that I did believe that K-State 105 was meant to be an economic development arm to help be startups and to actually be, they said themselves, the ecosystem for economic development. I mean, that is what they shared with Commerce. We are the ecosystem for that. And so my question is, if they're not that ecosystem, if they're not the catalyst that's driving startups to one location to try to get their information and their support, and then what are we, if it's just extensions, how much are we currently spending? And maybe that question could go back to the chair, because now we're just going to go ahead and add 5 million if it's just going to 4 million to the extension.
Chairman Howe.
Thank you for the question. I'm trying to get you some numbers on that because I do know different counties have different arrangements for how sometimes it's in a county courthouse or some other county asset, and there's a relationship between research and extension for that space. So I'm trying to get some more accurate numbers for you before I just give you false data.
I guess in if you could elaborate on the discussion from your committee as to adding the 7.5 million for the veterinary medical center operating expenditures, and what the result would be if it was sized down from 7.5 million to 3.5.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I am to blame for offering the motion to delete the 5 million. I offered that in my committee. So at the beginning of the session, I got from the university, the sheet that many of you got that said, K-State priorities, then there's the Regents priorities, and so on. And so the first two priorities were K-State 105, $5 million, then the vet med, $7.5 million. So I had the privilege of going on this tour at K-State this fall, and they did an excellent tour. We got to see a lot of different things. We saw the animal diagnostic lab, which is very close to the vet med side of things. But learning more about the vet med side of things was really eye-opening. This is a long-standing program and part of K-State that we've had for a long time. It's well-established and well-respected across the region and the country. But right now, because of staffing levels, they have 111 full-time faculty. They have one of the lowest faculty to student ratios in the country. And the state funding is pretty low as well. So what I don't want to happen to the School of Vet Med is for it to end up like Oklahoma State. At Oklahoma State University, they got put on probation because a probationary period to address some concerns. And if they don't address those concerns, then they could lose accreditation. And then it could have a real detrimental effect to their School of Vet Med. We don't want Kansas State to get to that point. And so that's why they requested $7.5 million of recurring funding and state support. With agriculture being our number one industry in the state of Kansas, with the effort that was made underway well before I got to the legislature about an animal health corridor from Manhattan to Columbia, Missouri, it just seemed to make sense to put money towards vet med. Rather, if you had a choice between vet med and K-State 105, it seemed like the answer was clear to me for someone that's been following kind of the state's position on this for quite some time. So is there room for both? Perhaps that's the question for this committee to decide.
Any further questions? Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm concerned too. I've seen that map of how many veterinarians that we're lacking, and that we have counties that literally have more animals in them than people, and they have no veterinarian. So, and I know that my county does benefit from those students that do come and help with our overpopulation of domestic animals. So I certainly wouldn't want to impact that, and I certainly feel that our need for veterinarians in our state is definitely a priority. But I also support K-State 105 because I see the good work that they do in my county there. So a little bit of a dilemma on what the priorities really are, but definitely we'll listen to the debate. But just, I am concerned about our lack of veterinarians across the state.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just so the committee knows, there was a difference of opinion on our committee, our budget committee, on this. And as we proceeded, I was somebody on the committee that actually, as my colleague from Wyandotte County, saw the importance in both of the programs as they come forward, the effect that it has on the county I live in of Douglas. I made light of the fact that, that there was, money that was being coming to Lawrence, and the effect that it has in helping with the establishment of 9 new businesses and such with K-State 105. And I thought that is something that is extremely important, to my community in the area that I represent, but at the same time being part of the animal corridor, as the chairman brought up, in Lawrence, and the effects that it has there. I thought that they were two excellent programs, and supported both. So, and it is tough because you're almost inevitably going to have to take away from somewhere else. But, the truth of the matter is they are two very good programs. So that's my 2 cents.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why are we in such a quandary about both when both are unique and both are needed?
Is that directed to the carrier of the motion or the chairman?
To the chairman.
Chairman Howe?
The reason I brought that up is that you said there was a debate about it, and both are good, but is it we don't have enough money to do both, or some decide one is more important than the other? I hate to put you in that position, but I see both as being needed in the state.
Chairman Howe?
Thank you. It's a dilemma I think we're all in, depending on what budget committee we're on. We have a narrow view when we're in our budget committee, but we realize there's a bigger thing that we're dealing with, and that's our all-state budget. And so that's always a concern. And whether it's sustainable, can we afford to sustain something in the out years? So I feel like that's our charge is to make priorities. Our committee the majority felt like the vet med was, I guess, more of a priority than 105. I'm open to discussions to see if there's a reduced number that might allow both to work, but I think our institutions really do need to make priorities. I mean, year after year, they come to us with more initiatives, more programs, and we never hear about what they're parting ways with. And I shouldn't paint with such a broad stroke because there are, especially our regionals, have really gotten lean on how they're doing some things. And so I appreciate that. But for the big three, I don't see that as much. It's not as clear to me. And so I really feel like we have to make some hard decisions, and whether it's choosing one over the other, or maybe we can come to some middle ground on that. But that might be a discussion that we have to have next week.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the motion? Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm assuming that this was some sort of a compromise. Can you tell us, was there conversations with Kansas State, and are they okay with this? Are they in a ramp-up spot with the vet med? Does this affect funding for vet med in 27? Will that go back to 7 million? Or what were the discussions like?
Representative Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I don't know how your weekend was, but mine was on a lot of phone calls and texts and emails of how, if there's a way we can benefit both. Yes, this is discussions with K-State. The number I came up with, they are agreeable to. It is a $4 million for 26. This is not perpetual. It was a 2-year before. This is 1 year. They have 1 year to prove their mettle. They know it. I hope everybody else does as well. I will say, as chairman of the Agriculture Committee now for the 5th year, and having conversations with Dr. Rush, who is the dean of the vet school, not at one time this year, or anybody from K-State come and say, would you help us advocate for more money for the vet school? Many years, we have fought in this building and outside to get more money, to get more slots for Kansas kids. In this room, I believe 3 or 4 years ago, Dr. Rush was here to testify to the Agriculture Committee on what they're doing to get more Kansas students here. Why are we bringing out-of-state students? Why is that model to make it funding on out-of-state tuition? This does bring some slots. I don't know if they're ready for that whole money. That's why with the split, that 3.5, that gets it going. And then if the will of the legislature moving forward, that 7.5 goes back to, that's fine. But that's the discussions of where we are right now. This is to keep the work that's being in 105 and to start that process within the vet school.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for that explanation. I think that'll make it easier on some of the people that were concerned about the vet med. I do want to talk about K-State 105 for just a minute. For those of you that have not watched the video from Commerce on Monday, House Commerce Committee, I would encourage you to do so because they had adequate time to discuss what the program was, and more of it came out. I had them in earlier in the year with one of their partners, Network Kansas. Network Kansas is the part that does revolving loans to businesses, gap loans to businesses, and helps businesses start. There wasn't enough time for K-State 105 to really go through their program. And there certainly wasn't enough time in the Budget Committee to go through what K-State 105 is. It took them about an hour to go through what they do with questions in the Commerce Committee. And you know that's one of the issues we have with these budget committees. You can't give a university that has a budget over $1 billion 10 minutes in a committee or 15 minutes in a committee to discuss the whole budget and be able to drill down on every little thing and answer every question. It's just not the right process. So I'm glad that it kind of worked out this way where we were able to have the business side of K-State 105 come in and discuss in the Commerce Committee what they do. It is very bad. It's not just the extension. They do use the extension offices for things, but they help businesses get to the next level. A lot of businesses out there, and my vice chair, actually, his comment to them was, wow, I really wish that I knew you were there because my business might have survived if I were able to lean on you for some information and some research and some help. But he didn't know it was there. And that's one of the problems we discussed with K-State 105 and Network Kansas both. They're both great programs. We need to get it out there what they do and that they're there. And I've charged them with that, both of them with that, coming up this next year so that more businesses can utilize them. But they do research and development. They talked about one company that was a Kansas company or is a Kansas company, and they helped them with research and development and engineering and testing, and now they are a global company. That's enterprise. You want to talk about enterprise, that's enterprise. They took another company that was a Kansas company, a local company, and helped them get to SEMA and helped them better their product. And now they are a national company. They're selling their product from Kansas to other states. That's enterprise. That brings money back to Kansas. Most businesses in Kansas sell to Kansans, and the money stays in Kansas. Anytime you can bring money in from out of the nation and out of the state, it's a really good thing for the state of Kansas. That's just a couple of examples. I would ask you to go, if you're not going to support this, I'd ask you to go watch that hour-long video and presentation because it really gave them adequate time to explain what the program is. And as your Commerce Chair, I do support it. There are some issues with it. We've had those discussions. I really want to see what their plan is to advertise this and get it out so that other businesses can know it's there and take advantage of it. They use the extension offices for micro-credentials for workforce development, and that is important. Right now, we have a severe shortage of skilled trade workers, and when a company comes to them and needs some training, K-State 105 is there for them. So that's about all I'm going to say about this. I will support this motion, and if there's concern about the vet med, I would have supported just adding the money back in for K-State 105 for 1 year. So thank you.
Chairman Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So things are fluid in the legislature, and so when we did our budget hearing, I only had limited information. And I did go over the annual report back to the legislature by K-State 105. And I don't know if everybody has seen that or not, but if you haven't, probably should review it before next week. But in it, there's no summary. It's just basically an itemized list of how they used the money. So I appreciate the detail in which they account for the dollars that we've authorized. However, on some of those items, I just couldn't wrap my head around. Like, you know, for instance, there's an initiative to go into basically train some extension staff or personnel to go into libraries to help people with digital literacy. While that's incredibly important for people that don't know how to navigate the internet and some other things, that's incredibly important. I just don't know if that's what we intended when we started this project. So I think if this body decides they want to support it in the future, we've got to narrow the focus more, so it's not getting into the fringes of things that that it wasn't intended to. For example, the commerce presentation that Chair Tarwater mentioned, there was a business in my district that was cited in that presentation. Now, that would have been nice to know before they came to my budget. So it was nice to learn more about the value that a manufacturer in my district benefited from K-State 105. So I only had limited information on that. So I'm open to what this committee would decide. I mean, and I don't want you to think that just because the chair and the budget committee report says this, we have to follow that. Now, it is a recommendation, but my only request is that we don't have any new spending. So if it was $7.5 million, which is new spending, so I apologize for that. That's $2.5 million more new spending. So if we're going to do anything, I think we should adhere to $5 million or below. And so that would require us to reconsider this probably next week. So, Mr. Chair, I'll close my comments.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, let me get back to the first question, and that is, I've heard, and not listening or doing some investigation prior, that the dean of the school has said they don't need the $7.5 million. I have heard the chairman say that that was the original need there for K-State, that was the top priority. Can you go more into detail on what that $7.5 million is going to do for the vet school in particular? And are we in danger of losing accreditation? And how much of the fees that they charge goes to reimburse the overall cost, and how much is subsidized by the SGF?
I believe that question is directed to Chairman Howe because you keep looking at him. So Chairman Howe.
You're asking how much is for the slots or for their students, or
let's talk
for
about
the faculty?
Is it 2.5? Is it $5 million? Is it $10 million that the vet school needs in order to maintain accreditation and or bring in new students? And I still don't know why you're saying that we're not bringing in enough students. When I go there all the time, I see new students all the time.
Chairman Howe.
I think what I was trying to point out, they have one of the lowest faculty to student ratios in the country, and the state funding is amongst the lowest nationally. And so we're kind of getting to the point to where, you know, we're getting dangerously close to going down the road Oklahoma State did, and we don't want to do that with our institution. So this would help bring on some more faculty to help with that ratio. and to support the institution in what they're trying to do. And I think that's another issue about the in-state versus out-of-state. I do know, I talked to the dean, and I know she's working on that to see what we can do for this next academic year.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, I guess, okay, so first of all, the request from Vet Med was not for 7.5. They may want some more money, but they haven't specified. We don't have any changes of performance measures or how this would affect the performance measures. Would it make more either small vets, small animal vets, or larger animal vets in the general population? Do we have a shortage that's out there? There's a question in my mind whether or not we should put any of the money to K-State Vet Med, because they didn't request it and we don't have any performance measures.
Chairman Howe.
Mr. Chairman, that is not true. It's my understanding that they did request $7.5 million recurring vet med. It was in K-State's request to the legislature. So it would be to support the College of Vet Med, to improve operations, recruit and retain faculty, and offer scholarships for students that will practice in rural Kansas.
Representative Helgerson.
Okay, well, they'll get the message. I'd sure like to see some more discussion on whether or not they need the $7.5 million. Now, as the other part of this, and whether or not it goes to 105, you know, I bit my tongue a couple years ago on this process, but what we're doing is creating a series of economic development agencies in each one of the universities. Wichita State's going to do the same thing. This is a decentralized model that in other areas, such as childcare, we're trying to consolidate all the childcare services into one because we can get it more efficient. I don't know if it's a decentralized or a centralized model that works best. But I think what really matters is the institutions, the Department of Commerce, the universities, the big three, the small three, everybody says, we're going to do this because that's the only way to get more money. And our criteria should be, how do we get the most bang for the buck? If it is 105, great. Then take the money from Department of Commerce, or say the Department of Commerce is shifting over this amount of need to develop the rural areas or develop these new industries because Department of Commerce isn't doing it. We then should be looking at the fund that was created years and years ago. That was the Economic Development Fund. To use that fund specifically, that's what it was charged with, to help the innovation. And in fact, K-State used to have an innovation campus, and I don't know if they still do, but that's what the money was targeted for. We've opened up the banks to any institution to say, we're going to help everyone. And it's not just K-State. Wichita State's just as guilty, and so are the other universities. But decide where your focus should be, because otherwise we're going to try to fund everybody as opposed to funding what we have charged to take care of economic development. I know, that was my...
Chairman Howe.
Thank you for that, Representative. Mr. Chairman, I think given the lack of information about some of the questions that were raised, whether it's Vet Med or 105, I think it might be premature to accept this motion today, so I will oppose it, but I'm open to discussing over the next week as we work on putting the budget back together. You know, if there could be any middle ground found, but I do think doing so now is without additional information would be a little bit premature. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, and actually, the vice chair and I were just having a sidebar conversation, and actually, this is probably something that until we start working the budget on Tuesday, you have this be a topic in your budget committee, so you can have a committee hearing in regards to the vet school and K-State 105, any other initiatives out there. I was gonna reserve my comments, but since Representative from Wichita made a reference to EDIF, if you look at the EDIF table that is in House Bill 2007, I know that Chairperson Mosier has probably extensively looked at that, there's been drastic changes. And I'm going to say, in regards to the years after the pandemic, there have been two items that has always been brought up by, it seems like, everybody, and that's child care and housing. The third is economic development. And when looking at the results of money that has been funneled to the Department of Commerce in some programs and seeing exactly how they have planned out, they're not working. They're not generating economic development. And we are just putting that money out there for programs that is not generating results. And we had, I believe, $18 million in requests, more than what we received from the 80% from the lottery proceeds in regards to EDIF. So that means we're $18 million in the hole. And we made, well, research and I made difficult decisions in regards to EDIF. Some programs that, why are we funding this when all this federal money came in for a particular item, but yet we're giving $1 million a year? We cut it. Housing, we put almost $60 million into housing in the last 3 years. They're getting $2 million in EDIF. We cut it. There's a program out there called I Love Kansas. And I am a product of somebody who lived out of state and moved back to the state of Kansas. But is that particular item generating the results? No, it's not. But yet we're sending money out there for fairs, rodeos, homecoming events to try to get people to move back to the state of Kansas who have left. We cut it. We cut the operating grant. We had, like I said, $18 million in requests over the actuals of fiscal year 2024. Now, why in 2 years would we need to see an increase of $18 million for economic development purposes? Because everybody wants to get into it. The governor also has a provision in her budget of cutting out of EDIF the $4.5 million that goes to KBOR and having that funded by state general fund. That is something that I believe Chairperson Mosier is going to have a discussion in regards to EDIF, or we have the discussion in here. We got to right-size things. Things have got out of control in the last couple of years, and we've got to go back to a sense of normalcy. We got to make sure that when we're funding items, whether it be out of EDIF or out of state general fund, that the results are coming in and they're there. And we got to be careful in regards of child care, housing. And I went to a meeting, a budget working meeting with other legislators from across the nation in Nashville in November. And the individual that spoke from Washington, D.C. said, states, you're doing housing wrong. Your focus is wrong when you're trying to address housing. I expressed that to the governor, and we are having a meeting to try to right-size what we are going to do in regards to housing, because it was explicitly said that states, you are doing it wrong. You're throwing good money after bad. And all of this seems to have enveloped because of, after the pandemic, we had all this federal dollars coming in, we had savings in our SGF. We have got to go back to, like I said before, a sense of normalcy in structuring this budget. That's my remarks. Representative Helgerson.
Mr. Chairman, you made a remark the other day about sometimes we think the same way after working together for so long, and you're exactly right. I think that we should, on this motion, we have to look long and hard on what models we want to use to develop economic development, a centralized or decentralized. I share with you and agree with you, the Department of Commerce, the questions and concerns I have. we're doing things the same old way, and it doesn't get us out of the fiscal hole. And, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this motion, but I would welcome the opportunity to start talking about EDIF or any of the other programs and right-sizing it, because it is a problem that we have, that the agencies, the universities, they go to wherever our interest is. If we have housing one year, they'll start putting emphasis in that, and the governor will do the same. If we have economic development, they'll start focusing their programs. We need to tell them what their focus or what their lane is, and then work toward that goal. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So am I understanding that regardless of the outcome of the motion, that the committee, the Higher Education Committee, is going to take a look at this, review the veterinary request, review the expenses, the budget of K-State 105, and come back and make a recommendation regardless of this outcome? Is that correct?
That'd be my intent, but Chairman Howe.
If that's the will and instructions of the chair, I'll certainly do that. And if that's what it takes, I'd be glad to work on that.
Representative Ballard.
I just need a clarification. I think I heard there was an agreement between 105 and vet medicine. Was there an agreement that was made that they could live with?
I believe that would be towards the maker of the motion, so Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was talking with leadership at Kansas State and the negotiation of how both those programs can survive.
Okay, but it wasn't between higher ed and K-State?
Representative Rogers.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, Representative Rogers, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the discussion. A couple of things I want to clear up. K-State has the vet school as a priority. It was number 2. Number 1 priority for K-State was 105. If I misspoke and said that the vet school didn't need the money, I apologize. If that's what you heard, and I didn't want to put words in the mouth of the dean, simply saying it was not expressed to those of us who have been in this position before to advocate for programs. In addition, that we haven't talked about is things they're doing in rural health care. And some may say, well, what are you doing in your lane? They're partnering with KU Med Center. And in a personal standpoint, yes, the first hospital to sign up is in my home county. And what they're doing is they're identifying how a rural critical access hospital can survive. And we have those discussions. And in light of other discussions, we can be here for weeks renegotiating everything that was done, and we probably will next week. But as we look at, if economic development is going to be the bullseye, well, by the time you get K-12 and social services, there's not much left. And we sit here and argue about, like many have said, here we're spending hours and hours on a couple of $1 million, and the big ones, the billion ones, we just pass through. So I just wanted to make you aware, too, that there's a lot of partners in with this program. So, Mr. Chair, again, this motion is for the $7.5 million that is in the budget for the K-State Vet School, be split out $4 million for K-State 105 for 2026 and $3.5 million for the vet school for fiscal year 2026. I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. We are back on the budget for fiscal year 2026. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Committee on Appropriations adopt the Budget Committee report for K-State University Vet Med Center for fiscal year 25 and 26 as amended.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Amix. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, Chairman Howell, Wichita State University.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wichita State University for fiscal year '25. So the agency's revised estimate is $993 million, including 128.5 SGF. The agency's revised estimate is $120.4 million, or 13.8% above the 25 approved amount. So there's the boilerplate language for what I've read previously. And then other non-SGF increases include $71.2 million for Wichita Biomedical Campus, $30 million for the Health Collaboration Fund, $19.9 million for federal grants, $6.8 million for educational building funds projects, and $1.9 for other adjustments. It's partially offset by a decrease of $23 million for salaries and wages. The agency requests 2,908 FTE positions, an increase of 189 FTE positions above the approved budget. So the LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate and with the following adjustment to delete the 189 FTE positions for research in the public service program. The Budget Committee concurred with the LBC's recommendation. Mr. Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
All right, committee, any questions in regards to 2025? Seeing Representative Helgerson.
They asked for 189.2 FTE positions
Chairman Howell.
above.
Yeah, thank you for that. So there was a robust discussion of that. I know in the budget summary report, there's a description of what public service is and whatnot, but it wasn't anything the university came to us with a concern about or a request about. So
It's just a whopper.
it is. It is.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that one caught me off guard a little bit too, but when you look at the number of FTE positions at 2,900, we're looking at a 6% reduction. That's probably just a reduction in shrinkage more than anything else. I mean, it's a big number, but not in the broad scheme of all FTE positions at the university. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to remind that this committee did last week approve over 200-plus new positions at the University of Kansas, and that was over a $40 million increase. So it wasn't, at least one in the regions did get an approval by this committee, and we did talk about it. Thank you.
Any further discussion in regards to 2025? Seeing none, Chairman Howell, 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the agency requested $792 million, or $791.2 million, including 113 SGF. Agency requests $73.8 million, or 8.5% below the approved amount. The decrease is primarily attributable to $5 million SGF for aviation research, $52.7 million for salaries and wages and capital improvements, and $54.3 million for the Wichita Biomedical Campus. The Special Committee on Legislative Budget concurred with the agency's revised estimate for fiscal year '26 with the following adjustments. Those 189.2 FTE positions. And the Budget Committee concurred with LBC's recommendation with the following adjustments to, one, add or to restore the 5 million SGF for aviation research for fiscal year '26. That was included in last year's budget for research for Textron Aviation at the NIAR facility. Number two, add 750,000 SGF for a one-time spend for Wichita State to conduct a feasibility study to determine requirements to establish an accredited dental school for fiscal year '26. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Committee questions in regards to fiscal year 2026? Representative Helgerson.
The 5 million for aviation research, can you give me more details?
Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Textron Aviation approached the legislature last year about putting forth a commitment and investment of $5 million for research via NIAR. And as you may know, the research that NIAR does is they have all the capabilities. They have, they've been able to leverage their capabilities with companies like Spirit. There's also a pool of money that is open sourced. So if there's suppliers or anybody else in the aviation world that would like to partner with NIAR, there is a state investment pool. It's a total of $15 million in the last year's budget bill. So 15 million, the LBC deleted 5 million of that. So we're down to 10. Our committee thought it was important, especially for Textron Aviation, a company that has a payroll over $1 billion in the state of Kansas, over 11,000 employees, union and non-union. And the return on investment, I think, Mr. Chair, is quite large for the state's second leading industry, and that's aviation. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is just restore the funding that we approved last year. Mr. Chair.
Representative Helgerson.
Well, it gets, when I did, first of all, which campus is this on?
Chairman
Where are
Howe.
they spending the money? Is it at the Textron plants, or is it at the NIAR up north of town, or is it at what used to be the Spirit Boeing campus?
Chairman Howe.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a breakdown. I do know the 5 million for Textron specifically. There's like 20 different research projects that they're working on with that 5 million that we appropriated last year. I don't know physically where all the research is, but I assume, I presume that it's at NIAR, but I can't say exclusively, you know, where everything is physically. I would have to request more information, Mr. Chair.
Representative Helgerson.
Is there any federal matches with this? Because they've talked about how they've received so much of federal funds for the specific research.
Chairman Howe.
I do know there's federal dollars that do flow to Wichita State University and NIAR for a number of research projects, but I don't know specifically. I'm not aware of any match from the federal government to match our 5 million. I think our state has just taken the position of supporting research in that space for quite some time, and I think Wichita State University is #1 in the country for research in aviation. So,
Representative Helgerson.
Full disclosure, I'm going to have to white light this because I have contracts and agreements both with Textron and NIAR and Wichita State, et cetera. However, if we're giving 5 million or 10 million or 15 million, there should be some discussion about where does it come from, What is the matching requirement? What are we getting out of it? What kind of performance measures are there with regards to this funds? And it doesn't matter if it's the #1 industry in Wichita or to Spirit or Textron or anyone else. State general fund appropriations should be scrutinized by the subcommittee and by the full committee to decide not just are we giving money back to business because we think it's good, but what are we getting out of it?
Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And all of those dollars are spent in NIAR. And so what happens is these companies will go to NIAR, just like the Department of Defense, and they have a project, they need something, they need innovation. They go to NIAR and they get a plan for that innovation. Textron actually has a payroll that is growing over $1 billion annually just in the Wichita area. That means, I think Representative Tarwater noted this, it's over 48 million. I did a chat GPT and it could be up to $58 million annually in payroll. One of the biggest problems they have is that they have turnover. And part of that is attributable to the workforce not being there. Part of it that the workforce is not ready, that they're not properly trained. And so part of the innovations that NIAR is helping them with is to create the technology gap between not actually having hands-on projects. They're 2 years behind on multitude of work. It's not the work that they are lacking. They have the work. They don't have the bodies to do it. And what NIAR is doing is providing the innovation to keep that particular industry pumping in Kansas. That's the best economic development for Kansas. And actually, I agree, it should probably be right out of Commerce Department, because we're not going chasing after a business. We're maintaining and retaining a business that's actually adding real jobs back in the economy and growing those as well. So the money is spent in NIAR.
Representative Helgerson.
And I think the vice chair made my point. She hit 5 or 6 very, very important projects. Training, large industry. The problem is, where is it going for? If you just want to give a blanket check to Spirit, Boeing, Textron, or any of the other small companies that are doing a lot of the legwork, that's fine. But you should be asking specific questions. Is this for training, that they're going to use the training out at Textron or at the community colleges that are scattered around? That's my point.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this, I guess, kind of goes away from the specific budget discussion. But one thing, I did look kind of into this a little bit, because I too was curious. What I found, though, is that a lot of the technology that NIAR is developing, I get to use one of our accounting terms that I haven't used in a while, is fungible. So while some of it, I think, yeah, absolutely will be used by Textron, I don't think they're going to be the sole holder of that technology. I mean, there's some neat stuff being developed by NIAR, and I think the implications are across a much broader market than just one specific company. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion on fiscal year 2026? Seeing none, Chairman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion for the Committee on Appropriations to adopt the Budget Committee report for Wichita State University for fiscal year 25 and 26.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, second by Representative Amix. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, thank you, Chairman Howe. We are going to go ahead and move on into the Kansas Department of Agriculture. So, Chairperson Mosier. I believe the documents are going to be passed out for the budget for the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Kansas Department of Agriculture is obviously responsible for implementing food safety, consumer and environmental protection, and water resource allocation programs across the state. They inspect food and food processing and retail establishments. They work toward the judicious use of pesticides, protecting our crop ground, and also have an entire division about weighing and measuring devices as it pertains to commerce. So we'll go into 2025. The agency requests $102.5 million, including $15.1 million SGF and 355 positions for 25. This is an increase of $18 million or 21.4% above the 2024 approved amount. Increase is primarily attributable to higher estimates for several federal funds in 2025. They expect additional expenditures to be used for floodplain mapping and dam safety programs, increasing conservation practices to improve soil health on private lands, and creating more and better processing options for local and regional producers in 2025. And that will become important in 26 when we talk about the meat inspection funds. The agency requests include a net increase of 2.2 FTE positions above the number approved, and it is largely due to adjusting its workforce across multiple programs. The LBC concurred with the agency's revised estimate while removing the 2.2 FTEs. The A&R Budget Committee concurs with the LBC recommendation with the following notation. The Budget Committee notes the agency indicated to us that funding is available and those positions have been filled. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move to reinstate the 2.2 FTEs for 2025 for the Department of Agriculture.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Tarwater. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Mosier, or Chairperson Mosier, may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move, or
I close.
I'm absolutely lost. I close on that motion so we can all vote on it.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes.
So we're good on 25?
I'll say, is there any further discussion on 25? All right, seeing none, Chairperson Mosier,
Okay,
2026.
2026 comes with some changes. The agency requests $82.7 million, including $17.3 SGF and 356 positions. The request is an all funds increase of $11.3 million or 15.8% above the 24 approved amount. This also represents an SGF increase of $2.2 million or 14.9% above the approved number. And these four enhancements that were requested are the reason for that increase. $650,000 SGF for water structure inspections, dams, $350,000 SGF for meat and poultry staffing demand. I'll explain that. $1 million SGF for sorghum investment program, and $150,000 SGF and 1 FTE for a position as animal health veterinarian in Southeast Kansas. The agency has since withdrew that last request. So these increases are estimates for several of the federal funds that would be increased in 26. They estimate higher expenditures from these federal funds, including, again, like before, the floodplain mapping, dam safety programs, doing more conservation. In addition to these changes, the agency requests a change in how the state water plan fund appropriations are received, and this will happen across all the budgets that I'll be presenting today when it comes to water. They're basically, the Water Authority changed the different ways that money is allocated into new 5 budget lines or buckets. The first one being water quantity, which regards the aquifer and that situation, reservoirs and how we can clean them. And I mean, they provide water for 1/3 of Kansans, and so it's important to maintain those. Water quality defines itself. Resiliency, how we come back from water events. and also research and education. So water funding will go now into those 5 different buckets. So the LBC concurred with the agency request, except it deleted the $650,000 for the dam inspections and paperwork, the $350,000 SGF for meat and poultry staffing, and the $1 million for the sorghum investment program. The A&R Budget Committee concurs with LBC's recommendations for 2026 with the following adjustments. We moved to put in the $350,000, put it back for meat and poultry inspection program, because the federal government, that's supposed to be a 50-50 deal, and the federal government has not kept up their end of the bargain the last several years, and KDA has gotten to the point where they feel like they need to request that, and they recognized in the governor's budget that she put a proviso in that they agreed with, that if federal funds do come through, if the new farm bill happens and the money comes through, that KDA is more than happy to give the money back to the state, the $350,000. But we need that for inspectors in our local locker plants. We have custom plants that aren't always have a physical inspector there every time, but we also have state inspected plants where one of 26 state inspectors is there on harvest day so that they can evaluate those animals hanging on the rail to make sure they're healthy. And so those inspectors start at $22 an hour. So the state's getting a good deal by keeping these inspectors on. And so the committee felt like that was very important, that we reinstate that $350,000. And also the $1 million for the Center for Sorghum Improvement. Grain sorghum is the most water efficient crop in the state, that is raised in the state. And since water is high profile, there needs to be research continuing on improving grain sorghum strains. And also, if the state gives $1 million, the Grain Sorghum Institute is able to go out and get a 4-to-1 match on other checkoff dollars from other states to bring in, you know, if we put up $1 million, we could get $4 more million to do research. And so the committee felt like that was very important to continue grain sorghum research in Kansas. So now we'll go up to the, so water crosses into 16 different agencies across all of these budgets. Just the other day, the $800,000, you know, at KU for the electromagnetic mapping was discussed. And so given the overall importance of water, there have been key individuals meeting, working on water funding and how to divvy it out right, or what we feel is, you know, the most efficient and most bang for your buck. And so that's why I'm coming to you with these initial requests today. One thing that was discussed was with this new system of the buckets, and if those agencies could keep their regular expenses that they always keep and figure out which bucket they need to go in and then just put those expenses into the appropriate buckets, then we can review accurately where their money's going, even though it's been split out into these 5 generic areas. So these requests were not submitted by the agency, but according to the water discussions that we've had, the committee added $500,000 for water resources cost share, $1.8 million for conservation district aid, which those are both fairly self-explanatory, as is the next one, $500,000 for irrigation technology, continuing to improve irrigation methods across the state for efficiencies, going from, you know, the pivots to underground drip irrigation, those kind of technologies, and also $1 million for feedlot and stock water upgrades. So our water enhancements totaled $5.4 million. If you look at the governor's recommendation, she was asking for $9.4 million. So we came in $4 million under her budget. And I think that's all the information I have about 26. I'll stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Chairperson Mosier. And I was going to make a comment in regards to the water issues that we've been talking about. As you mentioned, it's spread out over 16 other agencies throughout the state of Kansas. Obviously, water has been an initiative, not just this session, but in past sessions. So when we put the budget together and we have all the budgets reported out, and I'm going to elaborate on that with the few minutes we have left after we pass this budget out. We're going to have research put together all the water initiatives from all the agencies and departments. So it's on one page. You can see everything that is being dedicated to water resources across the state of Kansas when we work on the budget. And there's another one that I'll mention after we close on this. And then we can have a discussion on that. We're also working with Chairman Minix, also Chairman Rogers, and he decided to leave today. But their committees, along with Chairperson Mosier, are having these discussions in regards to water. So they're going to be the resources that this committee will rely on in regards to moving forward with all of the initiatives with water. But we will have that in a condensed page so you can see all of the funding that's going into water. Representative Helgerson.
The governor suggested that we use the interest off of the rainy day fund. Does that include any of the money in your budget?
That is a non-topic. I mean, I will say that.
No,
No, it does not.
Okay.
I'm just asking for the money. The water thing later, we'll figure out where it comes from.
I'll answer that question. That is a non-discussed. We're not going to discuss that.
Well, the only reason is I didn't know if she included that money in the this budget or other budgets.
I think it's in other aspects to water where she was using the interest from the rainy day fund. But as I mentioned, we are not going to be touching that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Chairman Mosier, you may close.
I do have one quick motion, again, like we did in 25, to reinstate those 2.2, because the agency did in fact say that, they had the money, they have the positions hired. So I would move to reinstate the deleted 2.2 FTEs from the LBC recommendation.
All right, same as 2025.
Yes.
Is there a second? Second by Representative Estes. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Chairman Mosier, you close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Any further discussion? Representative Sutton.
Still on the budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay, nope. Pass.
All right. Any further discussion for the Department of Agriculture? Seeing none, Chairman Mosier, you may close.
I move that the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources budget recommendations to the House Committee on Appropriations be adopted for the Kansas Department of Agriculture for fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026 as amended and provided in HB 2007.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Estes. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. So a few comments before we go up to the floor. Actually, I just got handed the sheet of all the water initiatives in the other agencies and departments. And so we'll have that distributed out to the committee members. The other that we're going to be having a kind of like a balloon discussion is regards to bonding with the higher ed institutions, specifically KU, K-State, and Wichita State University all have initiatives in regards to bonding. We're going to put that together as a package. As you can see today, we did not get through all of the budgets. Actually, we have 9 that are going to be carrying over until tomorrow. So I wanted to, one, kind of discuss about Friday. As the vice chair mentioned a couple days ago, we are going to have lunch provided by Pinniger and Smith and also J.R. Barron. They're going to be providing lunch. What the plan is we're going to be coming in at 9. I met with I had my weekly meeting with the speaker yesterday. We will be having most likely final action on Friday. So everybody will be here to be in the chamber. After we have concluded our business on the floor, we will immediately come right back down here, and we will work until we are done. So plan on being here into the afternoon because we want to start with the deliberation on the budget on Tuesday. If you would happen to have a committee meeting that would be meeting in the afternoon of Friday, let me know. Budget committees shouldn't be meeting. You should have everything wrapped up. So I know that those committees won't be meeting, but if you do have a committee meeting, email either myself and Jeffrey. Let us know that you have a committee meeting, and we'll try to be accommodating as much as we possibly can. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think your suggestion for getting all of the various agencies and funding lines for the water issue is a great idea, and I'd like to consider expanding that to include childcare, eco-devo, and housing, because it seems like we have 300 agencies all working to solve the same problems, and I'd love to see if we could somehow coordinate or at least see what there is to coordinate in those various projects.
And that is a valid request, and so I will have Jeffrey and Joaquin in my office work with research.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
And myself. Not like I'm, yeah, I'm not delegating everything over there, but any other discussion? All right, we are due to be on the floor, so until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. we